Hey guys, welcome to the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. Looks like you guys are popping in there. I know we've had some changes, a little bit of technical, figuring some things out, but looks like people are popping in now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as more people show up, then they can just catch up. And the really great thing about live events is that they're all recorded. So if you miss anything, you can always come back later and take a look at it. So today we're going to talk about Power BI and dashboards, super duper low level, what it is, how it works, super duper basic. So if you kind of have always want to know a little bit more about Power BI, but maybe you were a little afraid to sign up for one because you thought it might be a little too technically challenging, this is the right event for you because I'm going to break it all the way down to the super duper basics and help you kind of get your feet wet on Power BI. All right. There we go. So don't forget to mark your calendars for next year for our Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference. It'll be in Vegas, hoping that everything turns out the way that it's supposed to and we can shake this nasty virus stuff. Hopefully we can all be in person together next year. Also, don't forget, if you're tweeting or messaging out on social media, make sure to use the hashtag M365 VM for today. And then next year, we've got this M365 Conf, so make sure and keep track of that as well. I just want to say thank you to all the sponsors that make this be able to happen. A little bit about me. I'm an MCT, a business analyst, and a Six Sigma black belt, so I've been doing this for a while. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Sharon E. Weaver. That's also my blog too, so if you want to find out more about what I have, it's www.sharoneweaver.com. You can always ask me questions, so I put my email address on everything. So if you're interested and have questions afterwards, just email me right there, sweaver@smarter-consulting.com. So I do run Smarter Consulting. It's an IT consulting firm, and we basically solve Office 365, Microsoft 365, SharePoint problems, all kinds of fun stuff. I also teach part-time for some local colleges. I've been around for a while. I've been doing IT for about 20 years, and I've been specifically focusing on SharePoint and Microsoft 365 for a good bit of that. So I've been in SharePoint for a little over 15 years, and I already showed you that. All right, don't forget that there is a raffle going on. Just make sure that you visit the vendor booth, watch the videos, put in your answers, and then they're going to give away 3 Oculus Quests that anybody can win. So the bit.ly's down there on the bottom left. If you just want to go to the bit.ly/M365 raffle, you'll be able to submit for that. Part of the money that's coming in from the sponsors for this event are going to go to support community relief, but in addition, you might consider donating yourself. So here's the links for that to happen. So I'm going to switch over and add some video to this. Last time it kind of made the deck look a little weird. If that happens, just shoot me a question and I'm going to keep an eye on these. So let's see if I can do this. All right. If I have any problems with the video or presentation or anything looking weird, let me know and I will change it for you. All right. So it's pretty simple. I'm going to show you how to build a dashboard in 3 easy steps. 1, you're going to connect to your data. So you can connect to data, especially in the Microsoft world, for many Microsoft sources. So things like Excel, SQL, maybe an Access database, SharePoint list, of course, or maybe some other source that's not Microsoft. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to want to model your data. So you're going to want to take that data, make sure you've got the right data, clean it all up, make sure it's got what it needs. And then voila, number 3, use Power BI. That's what people say in the data world. And that's kind of how you feel at the end of it, right? Is everybody's like, this is how to build a dashboard. You just get the data from the right place, make it look good, and then publish it out in Power BI. And they just leave it at that. And somehow you're supposed to figure that out. Maybe we should break this down a little bit more into something a little simpler. And I know this is a Power BI session, and we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about Power BI, but we're also going to talk about data, because just as important to the Power BI dashboard is also the data behind it. So before you start, ask lots and lots of questions. Before you even start building your dashboard, before you start building your reports, make sure that you ask lots and lots of questions about what it is that you're trying to put into this dashboard. The important things that you want to focus on are, what kind of questions is this dashboard even going to answer? So if I build a report, you think about in the old days with charts and graphs. If I give you charts and graphs, what are you using that for? What questions is that going to answer? Who's going to be looking at this? It's going to be a very different thing if a CEO is using this to make financial decisions at a strategy layer versus somebody maybe trying to decide how many chickens we should order for a dinner, right? It completely depends. The difference of what they're going to use the data for and who's looking at it will give you a lot of different things you're going to need to look for in your data. What are they going to use this dashboard information to decide anyways? So if you're going to get all of this data and you know who's going to look at it and you know what kind of questions they're asking, that kind of gives you an idea of how much data you need, what kind of pictures you want, what kind of graphs and reports you want. So this is really important stuff to get up front before that. How recent does the data need to be? This is where I always laugh, right? Everybody wants real-time data. The truth of the matter is most people don't actually need real-time data. The truth of the matter is most people are already getting data from a source that's only being updated once a day or maybe every hour, things like that. So when people say, I need data and I need it to be real-time, find out what real-time actually means. Are they okay with data that's been updated in the last 24 hours? Are they okay with data that gets populated every week? There's no sense in trying to run a dashboard that updates live if the source of your data only has a weekly update. What data do you need? This is a big question. So a lot of times when you're building a dashboard, when you go to build out the dashboard, you realize that there's data that's missing. That's because nobody ever sat down and thought about, what data do I need to build this report? What data do I need to build this particular chart or this particular graph? So it's really important when you're deciding what you're going to show to people, what data do you need to make that happen? And more importantly, what data do you have? And sometimes you have way more data than you think you have. So maybe you know that you've got data and you know that you've got it from a certain place, but you're missing something in between and you're looking for a specific answer. And then you realize that that data is being stored in a completely different place. So, sometimes we're looking for client information. And so we look to our primary CRM tool, but we're missing something specific. And that information is in another system, or we've got 3 or 4 different systems that track that. Or maybe we need data from a while ago that's been archived to something else. So be really clear about what that data is. The reason why it's important is if you don't have that data already, when's the best time to start getting it? Well, as soon as possible, right? So if you don't have the data that you need now, maybe before you start working on the dashboard and deciding what it's going to look like, start working on getting that data. And then by the time the project has rolled down, so maybe the project's going to take 6 months for you to build all this stuff out, or maybe it's going to take 6 weeks. Even if it's a 6-week project, that's 6 weeks of data that you could have that maybe you didn't have before. So I always tell everybody, before you start building any dashboards or reports, decide what data it is that you need, decide what data you have, and then determine what the gap is and go get the data that's missing and start doing it right away. If you focus on these questions before you start, you're going to have a much better success of building a dashboard or a report that fits the need for what you're trying to accomplish. The other thing is you're not going to trip over yourselves when you're trying to build that dashboard and realize that you're missing this data or you're missing that data, or it's not answering the questions that they want, because we want you guys to look good when you build this. All right, so that said, what is Power BI anyways? Well, it's this fancy new dashboarding tool, right? So the biggest thing about Power BI is that it allows users to connect to various sources and types of data. It lets them model, shape, and transform that data in a way that makes sense to you to use it. And then it allows you to create visualizations like report and dashboard so that people can understand more about the data. In English, what that means is it's an application that allows you to get information from other places. We can pull data in from an Excel spreadsheet. We can pull data in from an Access database. We can pull data in from a SharePoint list, right? All those things that we've got data everywhere, we can grab that data, take a piece of it, not all of it. This is not a data warehouse, but it can take chunks of that data. It can pull it into what we call a data model. We can blend that all together so that we know what we've got. And then it lets us create visualizations. And visualizations are a really fancy term for things like charts and graphs. So it basically allows us to take that data, model in a way that makes sense, and then put a picture to it so that people understand what that data means. All right, so there's a couple of different things in Power BI, and this is where it gets really confusing. It's like, well, what's the difference between all these different applications? Because isn't there just one Power BI? Oh no, there's not. So there's a thing called Power BI Desktop, which is the application that you can download to your computer. Here's what's really cool about Power BI Desktop. It's completely free. All you have to do is download it from Microsoft. You can put it on your computer and you can use it to get going. You can connect to data, you can create visualizations, and you can share those visualizations. There are a few limitations though. So it's a free download, you can use it, but the limitation is if you think of it kind of like Word, where when you create a Word doc, you can save it out as a docx file. The Power BI Desktop is very similar. So the Power BI Desktop will allow you to make flat reports that you can save as a PBIX file. So think of it kind of like a fancy Excel file where you've got in Excel, you've got the data, you've got your charts and graphs. If you guys are using Power Pivot or anything inside of Excel that's a little fancier, you can build relationships in there. It's very, very similar to all of the pieces in Excel, only you save it as a PBIX file. You can share that PBIX file with your friends and your coworkers. You can download it. You can do whatever you want with it. There is no interactivity in Power BI Desktop, though. It is designed to create these reports and share them as a PBIX file. But hey, it's free, so it's kind of cool. And if that's all you need, then a lot of times it's enough. The Power BI service, on the other hand, is a subscription model. So there is a Power BI Pro that you can install on-prem as well. But what we're going to talk today about is the subscription service that lives in M365. And basically, it's no different than your Office 365 subscription or your Power Apps subscription or anything else. There's a Power BI license for that subscription. This subscription allows you to have different spaces that coordinate with your teams and groups to save the reports and dashboards and data. You can also share those. So you can share interactive dashboards and interactive reports with other people by using the Power BI service. So the Power BI Desktop is a free tool that you can download and use to build out your reports. And the Power BI service is a subscription service that you have to pay for on a monthly basis per person that you can publish those reports out, share them, but you can also have interactivity with dashboards. So the Power BI service allows you to create dashboards that can be interactive. You can do drill downs and other people can use them. Another really cool thing is you can actually create a tab in Microsoft Teams and you can publish your Power BI dashboard directly in Teams, and anybody that has a Power BI license can access that dashboard right there in Teams. So to download the Power BI Desktop, it's really this simple. You just simply click on powerbi.microsoft.com and you can download it. Or you can also get it through the Windows App Store. Let me tell you a little bit about the difference. So the powerbi.microsoft.com version what it is you can manage the versions and you can update it when you feel like it. So if you download it from powerbi.microsoft.com, it will be an application that lives on your computer. You will manage the updates. You will keep track of it. The other option is you can download the same app from the Windows App Store. Just search for Power BI Desktop. If you download it from the App Store, Microsoft will be happy to keep it updated for you. You don't really get a choice about it though. So if you're going to use the Power BI Desktop app from the App Store, just know that the updates will continue to be applied automatically, and they'll keep up with it for you. Either way is fine. So once you get your Power BI Desktop downloaded, it's going to look like this. This is the splash screen for Power BI Desktop. And I always like to talk about this because there's really neat things on the splash screen that a lot of people just get rid of because they think it's fancy marketing stuff. There's actually quite a bit more here. So if you look, you can actually start a project directly from the splash screen. You don't have to get out of this if you don't want to. On the left-hand side, similar to all your other Office applications, you can directly get data, go to recent files, or open reports. On the right side of this, however, it has links. It has links to really important things. You can go directly to the Power BI forum, you can go to the Power BI blog, you can look at tutorials. And here's what's really cool, guys. I know that sometimes BI gets a little difficult and scary because it's a lot going on and there's a lot of things that come with it. But the Power BI team does an excellent job of posting things on their blog that humans can read. So even though if you're a data analyst, sometimes you're a little techie and a little nerdy, if you want to know more about what's going on in the Power BI product world, simply go to the Power BI blog. They make things very, very simple and easy to understand about the features that they're producing for the product. Plus, you can keep up with it. Okay, so once you've downloaded this, it's going to look a lot like this. And if you've ever used Excel, especially if you use pivot tables or Power Pivot, this is going to look really, really familiar. So very similar to Power Pivot, you have what's called the canvas, and there's some buttons on here we're going to walk through in a minute. But basically, you can use this application to connect to the data that you want to pull in for your data model. You can manage the data model itself, including relationships, and you can create reports directly from here. So if you notice on the top left of the screen, there's these three little boxes. I'm going to go back so you can see it. So if we look, it's on the far left at the very top of the black area over there. We're going to zoom in a little bit. And there's these three little boxes. These are three different views within Power BI Desktop. So the first one is what we call the report view. This is where we see all of our pretty visualizations and charts and graphs, and we can manage the look and feel of it. The second one is the data view, and the data view basically allows us to see the raw data. So we can look at the tables and the rows and the measures and the formulas and anything that we want to drill into. The bottom one is the relationships view. And if you click on the relationships view, it will allow you to connect the data that you have in Power BI Desktop and create relationships between that different data. So let's say, for example, I have an Excel spreadsheet and I have a SharePoint list and I also have some SQL data. I can connect to all three of those sources, identify them each as what I want to work with, take a piece of those, and then say, I now want to create a relationship between those three sources of data. I can do all of that right here in Power BI Desktop. So to be able to connect to the data, all you have to do is go to the ribbon, and there's this fancy Get Data button, and it's going to give you all of the places that you can get data from. What I've added in here, and then when they post our slide decks out, or if you want to jot this down or take a screenshot, if you go to this docs.microsoft.com link, there are some Power BI sample data sets that you can get started with. All you have to do is click on that link, download the sample data sets, and it'll give you something to play with while you're practicing. So basically, you just pick the data that you want. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. So what happens is when you click the Get Data button, it's going to show you all of the different places that Power BI Desktop supports. Notice we can do files, databases, Azure, or even some weird other stuff like the web or Facebook or QuickBooks. all kinds of fun stuff. And they're always adding new stuff all the time. So all you have to do is click on that Get Data button, select where it is you're going to try to get your data from, and then pick that, and it'll pull it in. So for example, we're going to walk through a use case. Maybe you are thinking about retiring or you're consulting for a company that where there are people who want to live where there's a lot of sunshine, they want to have better taxes, maybe good health care, and you want to be able to come up with some information for your customers. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, where are we going to get that data from? And in this case, we're going to use one of the easiest options available, which by the way is super cool, is that you can go to multiple websites and just grab the data directly from there. As long as the data is formatted in some way that Power BI Desktop can figure it out, it can actually pull it. So if it's just table data or a CSV file that's posted on the web, it's pretty easy to get to. If you're looking for sample data to use, this bankrate.com is a really great place. If you don't know it, a lot of banks have open source data, meaning that they have to publish certain rates or they have to publish certain information. In this case, Bankrate published this really nice open project about best places to retire and how they rank by state. So I've got this, and all you have to do is copy that URL, click on your Get Data option, pick the From Web, and then you can paste it into there. And yes, sounds like it's too cool to be true, but it really does work that way. And what will happen is it will find the data and it will actually show it to you in a preview. So you notice on this screen that you're going to see I've got two tables. The first one says document and the second one actually says table. Remember, we pulled it in from a website. So what will happen is Power BI Desktop is going to pull in all the files it can find. Well, the first file is the web page itself, so it thinks it's a document. Not going to do us much good. So we can uncheck that because we don't want it to corrupt our data. The second one says it's a table. 9 times out of 10, if it says it's a table, it's a table. So what we want to do is we want to check mark that one so that we can pull in the data and we can work with it. Once we've pulled that data in, you'll notice that it will preview the data. First of all, if you're previewing your data and it doesn't look like data, so it's garbly-gook or it doesn't make any sense or something like that, it's probably not good data. When you do your preview and you pull it in from here, it should make sense. So if I look at this, I can see there's a header for each item, there's a ranking for each item, there's a state name for each item. It makes sense. It looks like good data. If it looks like good data, it probably is good data. We might have to clean it up a little bit, but for the most part, it's probably fine. So the nice thing about Power BI Desktop is it provides this preview functionality so that you know that the stuff you're pulling in is actually the stuff that you want to use before you import it. So notice at the bottom that I don't have to import this until after I've looked at it. All right. At the very bottom, I have an option where I can preview this item, and then I can edit the data before I ever load it into my model. So this is really cool, guys. We can actually run a query and clean up our data prior to loading it into the model so that we're not just adding bad data on something that we've already worked really hard to set up. So whenever you click this edit button, it's going to open a query window where now we can take the data that we've pulled in and we can decide what we want to do with it. So we pull that data into this query, and what's really neat is this query has nothing to do with our data yet. So the data model is sitting off on its own, happy as a lark, and it doesn't even know this data exists. What we're going to do is we're going to preview the data that comes in. You don't need to know anything fancy for this. All you got to need to know is where you want to get the data, load the data in, and it should pop in just like this. As long as your preview looked pretty clean, you're probably okay. So we pull our data in for this query, and there's a few things that you notice. First of all, it kind of looks like an Excel spreadsheet, right? We've got our rows, we've got our columns, but the really neat thing in here is that we can clean this data up before we ever load it into the data model. So we can do things like change the type of field. If it comes in as general, we could change it to numeric, or we could change it to a formula, or we can change it to alpha if we want to. We can put mins and maxes on it. We can do anything we need to clean that data up. When we do that, what's going to happen is you're going to see that it's going to actually keep track of those changes. So for example, let's say that we got this data, we're previewing this data, and we notice that this particular field came in as a general field, but we really need it to be numeric. If it's numeric, we get a lot more functionality out of the dashboard and the reports. So all you have to do is simply click on it. It will allow you to change the type directly from here. Notice there's a lot of other options that we have. And we're going to switch it to a whole number. When we do that, it adds it into the steps in the query. So on the right hand of the side, you can see what the applied steps are. So first we got the data, then we queried it, and now we're changing the type of that particular column. What's really nice is that now let's say we make changes down the road, as long as nothing is dependent on that change, you can go through and delete those changes, and it will take that data back to the way it was. So if we change this particular column type and then we do 5 more steps, but we decide later on that we'd like to get rid of that change, as long as none of those other steps are dependent on it, we can actually go 5 steps back, just simply delete that one step, and then the rest of it will continue to be the way that we changed it. If there's a step that's dependent on any other step that you delete, from this applied steps, it will simply remove the dependent steps as well. So it's kind of a nice feature for a couple different reasons. First of all, you can keep track of what you did, and you can make changes easily. But third of all, if any of you guys need auditing for your data modeling, which by the way is a big request a lot of times, and they're like, well, what did you do to your data? You're like, well, I don't know. I right-clicked on this and I changed that. You can actually take this and you can take a screenshot of it and you can use that as your audit to show them these are the applied steps that I did to model the data while I was working on it, and it actually keeps track of it for you. All right. So now once you've got your data in and you've got your data modeled, all you have to do is load in your data and you'll be good to go. And then we're going to create reports or dashboards. And this is where people get confused. They're like, well, what's the difference between a report and a dashboard? And so here's the Microsoft definitions, but a report is essentially a collection of pages that contains visualizations. So think about an Excel file. An Excel file has multiple tabs, pages, and it's got charts and graphs, visualizations, right? So if you think about this in terms of an Excel workbook, a report is very much like an Excel workbook. It has multiple pages, it's got visualizations, and more importantly, it must come from the same data set. So an Excel workbook has data that lives within that Excel workbook. It doesn't live outside somewhere else. You're not pulling data into it. I'm not saying you can't, but in this example, if you just simply have a workbook that lives on its own, we're not pulling data into it from anywhere else, and all we're doing is creating different tabs with different charts and graphs, that is what a report is in Power BI. So in Power BI Desktop, we can create reports. We can create tabs with graphics that all use the same data model. As opposed to a dashboard. So when we talk about Power BI, the service, then we start talking about dashboards. And a dashboard is a collection of tiles and visualizations from various sources. The nice thing about a dashboard is this can be data that comes from multiple locations. So I might have an Excel spreadsheet that brings me in data for one tile, and a SQL database that brings me in data for another tile, a SharePoint list that brings me in data for a separate tile. So I can have 3 different tiles on the same dashboard, and they can all have different data sources. The other thing with this is that a dashboard can be shared with other users. So while the report can be saved as a file, the file can be shared, the dashboard can actually be shared in its entirety as is, and it can be interacted with by other users. So when we talk about the report view, remember we talked about our 3 views. So we've got our report view, our data view, and our relationships view. So that's where our views options are. And then if you look down at number 2, inside of a report, we have the canvas. And the canvas is where you're creating your visualizations. And if you think about Excel, but take all the grid lines out, right? It's basically the same thing. If you look at the bottom in number 3, you can see that there's a Pages tab, very similar to Excel, how you have different worksheets, right? So at the bottom, you have your tabs, very, very similar. Number 4 is called the visualization pane. This is where all your charts and graphs live and where all of the options are to change those visualizations. So maybe I want to customize the color, maybe I want to change the axes, maybe I want to apply filters so that I can only see certain pieces of data at once. This is where you do all of that. You select your visualization, you modify it, you filter it, you do whatever it is you want to do with it. The last area on here on the far right is the Fields pane. The Fields pane is going to show you all of your data sources. So when you bring in your data model or models, it will show you on the right-hand side those data models, and it will allow you to then drop down and choose the fields or information that you want to share for this particular report. It's pretty easy to create a visualization in Power BI. All you have to do is decide what data you want and decide which type of visualization you want to use. In this example, all they've done is taken the state field out of this retirement stats that we pulled in, drag it over to the canvas, let it go, and because it has geographical data in it, it will identify automatically that it is going to be a map-based visualization. You don't have to leave it a map-based visualization if you don't want to, but it kind of says, okay, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a map-based visualization because it has geolocation data, and so I'm just going to go ahead and start with that. If you guys have worked with Excel and you've played with the recommended charts, it follows the same model. So if I've got information that makes the most sense in a bar chart or a pie graph, when I drag that data over to the canvas, it's going to go to the thing that makes the most sense. Sometimes it's right, sometimes you got to tweak it a little bit. But it's no big deal. If you want to change what that particular visualization is, you click on the visualization, go back to your visualization panel, and choose a different type of visualization. If the visualization is not allowed for that type of data, it will be grayed out and you won't be able to select it. So it keeps you from hurting yourself for the most part. You pick the one you want, and it'll update automatically. As you update the different filters and the different look and feel options, it will automatically update it on the canvas. And you can have multiple visualizations at once. You can have visualizations interact with each other. It gets super fancy as you start to go down and play with it a little bit. Each time you have a visualization that you pop onto your canvas, if you notice underneath, the area where you can filter it and change the look and feel will change based on the type of visualization you have. So you'll only be able to do things that that particular visualization supports. When you're all done, it should look something like this. Notice that there are a collection of pages with static reports on these pages, and I could do a file save as a PBIX, and I could share that PBIX with my friends and coworkers. It is a little interactive in the fact that I can click on drill downs and I can filter things, but I can't really share this with anything yet because it's not a dashboard, it's only a report. That said, it's still pretty nice. One of my tips on here that you'll notice is that in this report, their tabs are named page 1, page 2, page 3. I highly recommend that in your reports you give your page tabs meaning. So you might say something like, states grouped by sales figures or whatever it is that the story is you're telling. So think about this collection of reports and graphs as a story that you're telling or a question that you're answering. And then when you go to answer those questions, simply name the tabs in the type of view or the type of answer that you're trying to accomplish for that person. What really gets nice about this is if you do that and your executive says, I'd really like to know how many states are over the threshold of $500,000 in sunglass sales, and you have a little tab that says states over 500K, how quick and easy is it for that person to be able to find what they're looking for? So if you remember back to the beginning, what data do you have? What questions are they asking and who's looking? If you have it set up so that it's telling the story to the right person with the right answers, they're gonna think you're a genius. All right, so once you're done with all of that, for free, you can simply save it as a PBIX file. You can put it in SharePoint. You can put it on your desktop. You can do whatever you want with it. And that PBIX file can be opened, can be changed in any Power BI desktop application. If you want to get super fancy and go out to the Power BI service, you can click the Publish button in Power BI desktop and it will say log in to Power BI. So notice you see the sign into Power BI. If you have an account, you're going to just go ahead and log in with your normal Office 365 credentials. It will connect you to your Power BI account, and it will automatically publish this to your Power BI service for you. If you don't have a Power BI service license, what will happen is you can add that license, or you can talk to your IT admins about adding that license. Most people ask me this question. In general, it runs about $10 a month per user off on its own. If you're in a large organization, there are volume discounts for that. So you can either click on this. If it's your own tenant and your own thing that you're managing, you could click this Need a Power BI account. It'll take you straight to licensing, or you can talk to your IT admin about getting that set up. Afterwards, what you want to see is this success icon. If you don't see success with a little green check mark, sometimes it didn't complete updating, and then you're going to think it's out there and it's not. If you don't get the success icon, click on the publish again and make sure you get that. As long as you get that, you'll be fine, and it'll be published out to Power BI Pro. If you publish it out to Power BI, to the service, what will happen is it will decide where it's going to go. So you have to pick where you want to publish it to. We now have workspaces that align with teams and groups to store all of your Power BI reports and dashboards, which makes it really easy to share those back out with your teams and groups. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like here in a second. Once you push it out there, you can do that. The other option you can do is take that PBIX file and you can upload it directly. So when you go to the Power BI service and you log in online, one of the options is to grab a local file, and instead of publishing it from your Power BI desktop, you can upload that file, that PBIX file that you just saved, or if somebody shared a PBIX file with you that they created in Power BI desktop, you can upload that file to the Power BI service, and then you can organize it in there. All right. Just a reminder, because this is all part of Microsoft 365, you can share this just like anything else. Just remember that if you want them to access a dashboard, they also have to have the same Power BI licensing. If they don't have that licensing, they won't be able to access it. They'll just get an access denied message because they won't be able to get into it. But you can share it just like you can share anything else. All right, so these are the QR codes for speaker feedback and event feedback. If you have quick questions, we have a few minutes left if you want me to answer any specific questions or show you anything specific in how it works. I can also pull up what it looks like now. So you can kind of see what this looks like. So you can see this is the Power BI service as of today. I've got a dashboard that's built out here just to kind of take a quick look at so I can kind of see how things are running. Notice that if I go over here to workspaces, it's going to have a workspace for every single team or group that I've set up. I also have a personal workspace, so kind of like your OneDrive, only in Power BI. And you can see that you can set up dashboards, reports, and data sets out here. So I can look at anything that I've got out here. Maybe I want to look at a specific dashboard or a specific report that I've built right out here in my personal workspace. So you can see this. Another thing that you can do is you can actually add this as a tab in Teams. And I'll show you what that looks like real quick. Let me pull this up. All right, so I'm going to show you my teams. And one of the things that you can do is right here in your team channel, you can actually add a tab for a dashboard. So once you've created the dashboard and modeled it all and promoted it out to Power BI, you can actually publish it right here. And to do that, all you have to do is inside of your channel, click the little plus sign on your tab, choose Power BI, and then it's going to ask you which workspace you want to access. and you can pick the dashboard that you've created for this, and you can publish it right here. It's one of my favorite things. Cool, neat feature. So I'm going to keep an eye on questions for a minute. If you guys have any other questions, we'll be around for a couple more minutes. Hopefully this was helpful in getting you guys to understand the basics of Power BI, and hopefully now you're not too scared to go in and start clicking around and trying it. I'll go ahead and pull up the download option. So one of the questions I got is, how did I create the gauge visualization? I actually just downloaded this directly from a template that Microsoft has. So remember I told you to go to the Power BI blog. They put lots of templates out there for you to use, and then you can just grab that particular visualization and you can set it up however you want. The next question is this fully accessible for people with disabilities? Will the experience be the same? That's a really good question. I'm a big fan of inclusivity and trying to set up things for accessibility. And to be 100% honest, I have not tested out Power BI for accessibility. I do know that pretty much everything that's on the web has some level of option for it, but I don't know much. That's definitely something I'm going to have to look into. The next question is, does permissions everyone work well with Power BI and the data being pulled into Power BI? Does the client need certain permissions for the data, like data stored in SharePoint? Oh, that's a really good question. So in Power BI, what happens is that you actually get the data that you want, and the data is copied into a model, so they don't need to have access to the data itself once you have put it into a Power BI file, because the data actually lives there. Now, what has to happen is, if you want to refresh that data, whatever account is being used to refresh the data has to have access to that data, but you don't necessarily need your users to have access to it to see it. Now, if you're going into Power BI Pro here, they do have to have access to Power BI, but the data itself lives in a data model that's separate from that. That said, there is options to be able to lock down the data, so you can set permissions around the data itself. Once you get into Power BI, you can decide who can see what pieces of the data as well. Next question is, are there any known connections with Tableau, or can it connect with the same data source? As far as I don't know specifically if it can connect to Tableau. Tableau is another dashboarding reporting tool that's very similar to Power BI. I don't think there's any concerns about connecting to the same data source, as long as it's in a data source that can be brought in to your Power BI tool. Question, how does the gateway work to integrate with on-prem? So yeah, so what you're talking about is the data gateway. What happens is the data gateway essentially allows you to decide what data you want to pull in to your model. And you can pull data into the data model through Power BI Desktop, and then you can serve it up directly here without any connection. But the data gateway allows you to continue to refresh that data and wrap some security around it before it comes in. So kind of think of it like a pipeline to your data sources. So I think we're about done. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to find me on Twitter or email or LinkedIn or any of those other things. Send me a message and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, have a great afternoon.